And Mary's back. Hello, everyone. This is
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
I saw my video for a moment.
Yes, we're live.
And then it went. I saw myself in the video, and then it blanked out. I don't know what's going on.
Well, Mary,
that's fine, Mary. We're live.
It's a cruel trick to keep your beautiful face from outshining the rest of ours. So it gives us a chance to not look so, drudgy.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is a tribute panel to Durk Pearson and Sandy Shaw. Both of them were born in 1943. Durk died in October, and Sandy died back in 2021. Do any of you have the exact dates?
Greg, I heard Sandy passed March a year ago, but that's...
Oh, March a year ago? Okay. Yeah. Well, Durk and Sandy, back in 1982, Warner Books published their book Life Extension, which was a big fat book about nutrient supplements and how you can improve your life with nutrient supplements. And it became a multi-million seller. And I guess it probably set Durk and Sandy up for life after that. They appeared on shows like Mike Douglas, local TV shows, and they got famous, but they also, in their later life, I think became less private, or they let's just say they were more private in their older age. So we didn't see some good stuff in the 70s and 80s out there. But
Chris, can I just intervene and say they've been private ever since I've known them.
Yeah.
They've been super strict about telling anyone where they lived, and even people who would be invited over to their at first apartment and then later house and the like, they had very strict rules about it. And the other thing is, just to touch on one thing you said about being set for life from the books, they kind of were, but then they weren't, because they bought a whole bunch of property during my time with them. They bought a whole bunch of property between Malibu and Calabasas in the LA area, Southern California. And then one of the people they purchased the property from was the Hollywood actor Clint Walker, whose French wife turned out to be a real she-devil. And they got into a big legal wrangle with them, and a lot of their money went to litigation. So they weren't quite set for life because of this problem. But anyway, it did help them tremendously, and they had bought up. They were assembling a whole bunch of property in the valley between the coastal range at Malibu and the higher hills up near Calabasas. And boy, that'd been worth a bloody fortune by now if they had been able to hang on to it.
Yeah, well, Durk and Sandy were mostly known for their work as research scientists, and these people were dedicated to their craft and also very dedicated just to learning. Durk graduated from MIT with a triple major in physics, biology, and psychology. Sandy graduated from UCLA with a double major in. Sandy graduated from UCLA with a double major in chemistry and zoology and a minor in mathematics. So these were two obviously very intelligent people and people who were very dedicated to science.
Now, Durk told me that when he was looking for somebody to share his life with, he looked for the smartest lady at UCLA, and Sandy was the president of the Smart Ladies Club there, and that's how they connected. So Durk knew what he was looking for before Sandy knew it.
I read somewhere too that Durk also took the GRE and got one of the highest tests on that test or something.
Yeah, Chris, that's what I was told by Durk, and also by the subsequent year's highest scoring GRE guy, Erwin Strauss. And they both told me that the testing institution would follow these people's lives or their stories for the rest of their life because they were so special. And in fact, Durk was also friends not only with Erwin Strauss, who was the highest scoring GRE guy the year after Durk, but also the one before him. And it was kind of a Slavic name person. I can't remember
Yeah.
his name now, but yeah, he scored, and that's a difficult test at best, even just to pass it, let alone the highest score.
Yes.
Yes, I've taken it. It is
Yeah.
difficult. Yes.
Yeah. Mary, you're also a woman of science. What can you tell us about Durk and Sandy? Because you've worked in, medical research and things like that your whole life.
Well, when I first read Life Extension, I immediately started using the shake they described in Life Extension, which was basically composed of a lot of vitamin powders. And I still have such a shake. It's morphed over the years, of course. I have different components in it, but I think it was the biggest influence that Durk and Sandy had upon my life, although I have referenced their work, not just Life Extension, but also their one of their 1993 publications, Freedom of Informed Choice, FDA versus Nutrient Supplements. And of course, I followed all of the court cases that they took on with Jonathan Emord. And they really, really did us a service, I think, in this, for all of us who like to take supplements, because they went after the FDA and basically forced them to label some nutrients, although they had to drag them back into court multiple times to get that done. And of course, I referenced all this in my book, Death by Regulation, where I talked about the FDA and how it had a war on supplements, among other things, because the FDA, according to my calculations, had probably shaved 5 to 10 years off each of our lives. So Durk and Sandy were very influential, I think, in my own personal health. I think in the health of the nation, in trying to call attention to how the FDA was really, basically had a war on supplements. And I contacted them when I was writing Death by Regulation several years ago, and because I wanted to get a copy of their brief on that I was going to reference. I knew about it, but I wanted to actually have it in my hands. And they very sweetly sent me a copy of the book. It's a small book, but I was very grateful to them. I followed their career quite a lot since I started out knowing them through Life Extension, and I actually ran into them at some of the libertarian conventions. So it was really great for me.
Yeah. They, I don't know what all the events they went to. I knew they went to the Liberty Editors Conference back in the 90s, which is an event I unfortunately never got a chance to make. I never actually got to meet Durk and Sandy. I worked at Liberty Magazine as an intern for 6 months, and I went into the database because, I could get access to the database. And I said, and I just wrote them a letter once using our envelopes, a real letter. And because I wanted to know what I wanted to do after I worked at the magazine, they said, we don't hire employees, but Sandy wrote back a really nice letter anyway. And when I found out she was very private, I was a little more flattered about it, that she didn't care that I'd done that, even though I really shouldn't, be using the magazine's database for my personal mails. But I regret that I didn't get to meet them just because of the nice letter I got back. And I certainly heard good stories about them,
Yeah, you would have enjoyed meeting them, Chris, I think, quite a bit, and they would have enjoyed meeting you. But I noticed the name of your forum is the Fountainhead Forum, and one of the first things I noticed about them when I met them 55 years ago in St. Louis, Missouri, was that they were big fans of Ayn Rand, and they could almost quote the books, the volumes at length, especially The Virtues of Capitalism, Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, and the like. And it was from there that they kind of developed, and I don't know if any of you know about Galambos, but they were actually followers of Galambos for a while. And Galambos was sort of like Ayn Rand on steroids. I mean, he believed that, like, if I expressed an idea on this program and you, Chris, used it, then you owe me money.
Oh, well, yeah. I've not heard of Columbus. Yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't stick with him. They were just
Yeah.
sort of fellow travelers for a while with the Golombosians. That was back in the 70s, I think. And then I think they got disappointed with the guy because I think yeah, I mean, my impression, not necessarily the truth, but he was in it for the money. And so what better way to do it than, hey, you've used my idea, pay me. And this is what he did. But Columbus was a big influence in their lives for a while.
Yeah, I wonder where do you go from go from here? I guess they'd taken courses at the Nathaniel Brand Institute. Coincidentally, someone reminded me yesterday was the 10th anniversary of the death of Nathaniel Brandon. So they'd taken courses from the Nathaniel Brandon Institute. I know Nathaniel Brandon mentioned that he'd met them once. But I don't know if they'd taken courses back then. But yeah.
Yeah, well, they were independent thinkers enough that they could branch on beyond both Galambos and Ayn Rand and see some of the flaws in their ways. Not that there are necessarily that many, but there were some, and they developed into very staunch libertarians, even what we would call free market anarchists. And that was sort of their ultimate philosophy, political philosophy.
Yeah, you see them. They kind of look like they're hippies, but they're also very much into science. It sounds like they were both extremely smart people.
They were.
Yes.
My wife and I were lucky enough to visit Durk and Sandy last July. And we did a number of interviews with them that people can go to and listen to. It's not video, it's audio. And it was an honor for me to know and work with Durk since 1991. But the audio's interviews with him, I can't even imagine that he's not here now, because his mind was so sharp in July when we visited with him for 2 days. I won't divulge where we were because he was so private about where they lived, and he even had an alias name, so we couldn't even mail anything to him under his real name, even though we sent all kinds of greeting cards and birthday wishes to him every year. It was never to their own names. But if the people want to listen to Durk talk, they can go to lifepriority.com, and we have a number of their interviews that we did with them over a 2-day period. But it's an honor for me to be here and tell about a few things that I would like to say about how I met him, because it wasn't certainly in my wheelhouse, if you will, to be in this industry with Durk Pearson and Sandy Shaw. But how it happened was very interesting, because through adversity, sometimes we learn more than we do through smooth sailing. And it was through adversity that somebody introduced me to Durk and Sandy back in 1991. Their formulas were being marketed and licensed to a company in Dallas at the time. And a friend of mine said, "Greg, you should look at this company that these people are with." And I said, "What are their names?" And they said Durk Pearson, Sandy Shaw. And I maybe heard about them through Merv Griffin. Maybe I forget, because I didn't concentrate on Merv Griffin shows, but they were on Merv Griffin many times.
Merv Griffin, yeah. Also Mike Douglas, you can find.
Yeah, and they got more mail on that Merv Griffin show than anybody in the history of Merv Griffin show. People wanted to know things. So anyway, I joined that company, and I got invited to meet Durk and Sandy in person for the first time in Dallas, Texas in '91. And I was one of 45 people in the room. And when they started speaking, it was like, how can I listen to this? Because everything they said was without a stutter, and it was intelligent. It was information that I had never heard before. And being a former professional athlete for 16 years, I played 10 years in the major leagues. I certainly was not looking to be in the nutrition industry. But after I met Durk and Sandy, and heard them talk, I said to myself, well, hey, Greg, if you're going to follow somebody regarding health and nutrition, these two might be the ones to follow. Because, when I was a little kid, my mom gave me a little red one a day at dinner. And I said, hey, Mom, what's this for? She said, well, Greg, that's for things that you might not get in your food tonight that I cooked for you.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to nutrition on a one a day, a red one a day. And then in 91, I'm in front of people that, they wrote the book Life Extension for doctors to help doctors understand how nutrients in the right amounts and the right forms can make a big difference in the health of anybody that wants to follow their teachings. And when I saw that book, and I called a friend of mine who owned a company in California, who sold nutritional products through all the Kmarts. At that time, it was Kmart. And my teammate, George Brett, was an endorser. So I called Dave Brubaker that owned Your Life. And I said, Dave, who are these people? And he said, Greg, they're kind of out there. And because I respected Dave because I knew him, but I didn't know Durk and Sandy. So Dave said, Greg, these people are out there. And I'm thinking, what's out there mean? Well, Durk and Sandy were cutting edge in every part of their life. They liked to. They were space travelers almost, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize how much influence they had on a lot of parts of our lives with the space shots that went up, with movies that they were in, and maybe helped with Clint Eastwood in one of them. So they did so much for people. And when I finally got to meet them and get involved with them on a business scale, which we've done through my company for the last 34 years, how do you ask a genius an intelligent question when you don't know vitamin A from vitamin C? And in one of the early calls I had with Durk, I was trying to be a smart aleck, I guess. And one of his formulas had 5,000% of the RDA of pantothenic acid in it. And I said, I got the guy now. He said, there's no way that they should have that much pantothenic acid in there. So on a conference call that I've done dozens and dozens of conference calls with Durk, but the first one I did, I said, Durk, can you explain why you decided to put 5,000% of the RDA of pantothenic acid in your formula for muscle repair and recovery? And about 2 minutes into his answer, I said, Pryor, why did you ask that for? That was one of the stupid questions you could ask. So in the future calls that I had with Durk, and I really hesitated on asking him hardly anything, because when you ask him a question, his answers, unfortunately, were not short. And I honor him for he didn't waste any time. He didn't stutter, but he certainly went into the history of basically why I even ask a question. His answers were just so cool, because he could talk down to people like myself whose IQ's maybe half of his at best. But when I went to college, they wanted me to read the Canterbury Tales in sophomore English. Well, I didn't read it and almost went to Vietnam. Dirk went to MIT, read every book on the campus probably, and he got sick. And I asked him, I said, Dirk, why did you get into the nutrition industry? He goes, Greg, when I went to MIT, I got ill, and I decided I was going to find out why I got ill. And there's other reasons why he wrote that. He and Sandy wrote the book, obviously, but that's what he told me. So when he went into the literature to try to find out why he got sick, he couldn't find enough. So that's why that was the impetus for them doing all the research they did for life extension, because they thought they would sell maybe 40,000 books to doctors nationwide. They never expected their book to be a bestseller, which it was. And they went on a traveling trip across the country doing book shows and this and that. And that's basically how I met him, because he was so busy writing that book that he licensed his designer food formulas to certain companies. And one of the companies was based in Dallas, like I said. And luckily for Greg Pryor, I got my ego out of the way, and I decided to followed Durk and Sandy from 91 on, and today I'm sad to say that they're not here, but I am happy to say that their lives will go on, not only in the nutrition industry, but in many industries that he and Sandy touched throughout their lives.
Yeah, Greg, I knew I'd recognized your name, and then I looked you up. Wait a minute. Yeah, when you mentioned you played with George Brett, I said, yeah, you were, Greg, I was a big Jays fan in 1985, so I will forgive you. But,
we can talk about that for a while.
Well, one thing we need to offline is we need to talk about the Pine Tar game. But anyway, but yeah,
but I hesitate to tell people what I used to do, because a lot of times you get labeled in your life. Yeah. And when I tell people I used to play Major League Baseball, they put me in a little square hole, and I never imagined that I would be talking on a call now to honor two of the most intelligent and the most dynamic people that this country's ever put out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But real quick story about George Brett. When I was with Durk and Sandy's formulas, still am. I went to George, who was having a tough time, and I said, George, why don't you take these like an hour before each game on your next road trip? Because he was scuffling, and I knew him really well because I played with him for 5 years. Well, he took the 3 formulas that I gave to him. They were in packets at the time. And he called me up on the road. He goes, what's in this stuff? I said, you can feel it, can't you? He says, feel it. I says, I feel great. He says, tell the owner of the company I want to endorse it. Well, I got the owner of the company that I was with to come to Kansas City to meet George, because I thought George's endorsement might be worth something. And when George met with the owner of the company, George says, well, what would you like to give me to endorse these products? And the guy goes, well, we're not going to give you anything. And George says, well, why not? He says, well, because you're going to use them. If you're smart, you'll keep using them. And if you keep using them, you'll probably tell people. So I don't think we should need to pay you anything. So we lost George Brett as an endorser. But he was one of my first customers, if you will, because I wanted to make sure that I introduced Durk and Sandy's Designer Foods to as many people as I could, and I still am doing the same thing. And it's been a wonderful life over the last 33 years to talk to Durk and Sandy every month of every year for 33 years.
But then
it makes me super happy, Greg, to hear that they had a successful product launch through you, because there were a couple of false starts there after the book came out. Sadly enough, where they tried to do some products and the deals kind of just didn't mesh and it fell through.
Yeah, and, we could name the companies, but I don't think it's an honor to them. I mean,
it wouldn't matter whether we did or didn't. That's old history at this point. But I remember going around with Durk, and mainly Durk, but Durk and Sandy as well, to Dick Marconi, the real brains behind Herbalife. And at that time, Dick Marconi was still alive, and he's the guy who financed Mark, Hughes. What was his name? The guy who was the figurehead for
Larry Thompson and Mark Hughes.
Mark Hughes. Yeah.
It's funny you're mentioning Herbalife, because we use the original Herbalife manufacturers in some of our products.
He had five factories, and one reason he probably did it is Durk and Dick Marconi got along famously. They really liked one another. And Dick Marconi, because originally when Durk and Sandy were going to launch their products, they were going to do multi MLM type company and do it that way, because that was the way Mark Hughes with Herbalife had succeeded. But it was really because of the impetus of Dick Marconi behind Mark Hughes that Herbalife really took off and became the success that it was, and still is, I guess. But it didn't work out for a number of reasons. But I'm so happy now to have made your acquaintance and see that their product line had gone on, because I really lost touch. I would talk to Durk maybe once a year for a while, and he invited me to go visit him at his new place out of state, out of California. But living in Europe, I never seemed to have the opportunity. It was always kind of off
Yep.
the beaten path of my trajectory. So sadly enough, I never got to visit them in their later years, but I knew them really well in their earlier years because for a couple of years, I lived about 5 blocks away from them in Manhattan Beach. So I would be over at their house quite often, and occasionally they'd be over at my house. And I think that was the last place they lived in California before they moved to their last home. But Durk and Sandy were, you could, as our mutual friend Rod Manis said once, you could walk around, this in the 80s, you could walk around behind Durk and Sandy with a tape recorder and pick up like a dozen business ideas that would make you a fortune, a millionaire, if you just implemented these ideas, and it was true. They just throw ideas out like crazy.
Well, I don't know if you knew this, but Durk became a cattle baron with Sandy in their new home, and they were so intelligent that they knew how to crossbreed these cattle to make them so durable to withstand the climate of the northern state that they moved to, and we could have his neighbor on the call today if we had enough notice, who worked with Durk on his cattle ranch for years and years and years, and is now going through his home and looking at all the belongings of Durk and Sandy over the years. So the story of Durk and Sandy is still developing and ongoing because we're learning more things about them even after their death, because they were kind of, I guess you could call them recluses. But they still loved, traveling and ordering things shipped to their new home, and that they've collected over the years. So hopefully we can talk about having a site somewhere where people can go and visit. And Scott, you and I have talked about the library that Durk has.
Mm-hmm.
The books are endless, the amount of books, and there has to be a good home to put these books so people.
Well, there is the Foundation for Health Research, which is the sister organization of the National Health Federation, has already made an offer through you, admittedly, to house those books and in our NHF Memorial Library. And it'd be great because that's one of the things we've done is accumulate books through different libraries, such as Bill Sardi. After he died, his library went to the Foundation for Health Research, and you can get a tax deduction for it as well because it's a 501c3. Yeah. So we just get an expert to attribute a value to it, and then that becomes the tax deductible amount.
Yeah, my wife and I are close to the executor of the will, and also the gentleman that is going to help with all the belongings, and we can get to them and find out, formulate a plan for their belongings, because they deserve, I don't want to call it a museum, but a place where people might make as a destination spot to go visit the belongings of people that had such a big influence on the health, not only of people in this country, but around the world. And I was just so fortunate to know this genius and his wife for as many years as I have. And as I said, whenever I interviewed him on calls that I would have, I tried not to talk very much, and I'm not trying to talk very much right now, but
well, I'm glad you are, because you have some history there that we don't know about.
Yeah, well, it's so funny my wife, hopefully she'll get back. She's going to be on the call a little bit here, I hope. Yeah. But when I brought the Durk and Sandy's designer foods home from this friend that wanted me to be in the business, my wife goes, "How much did that stuff cost?" And I told her, she says, "Do you know how many eggs and bread and milk we could have bought with that money?" Because a lot of people are, if they're not up on nutrition, they're down on it because they don't understand it. But Durk and Sandy, they understood it. They were users of what they created, and they didn't create things for their own for their own benefit as monetarily. The only reason their designer food formulas made it into the public was they got tired of making them for their friends. Durk would say that they had to measure out so much. They spent more time making supplements for their friends. They said, we just decided that we would license our formulas to a reputable company. We would tell them where the ingredients were to be purchased from, and then we would get a royalty on their sales. And that's how the products got out into the marketplace, because they never intended to have their name on any designer food formulas. And I'm so glad they did, because I've been able to enjoy, I'm 75 and I don't take any medications, and I haven't had a vaccine either, only because when I've talked to, I would always go to Durk and say, Durk, what do you think? And that's the reason why I haven't not been vaccinated.
Thank God.
Incidentally, I suspect Durk and Sandy could read something like Atlas Shrugged in 10 hours. Am I right? Or I wish they had this ability to be a super
they could quote and then quote from it. They had incredible memories, especially Durk and Sandy for certain other things. They were actually a very good couple together, because they complemented one another so admirably, and they had an interesting life. And their place, if you walked into their home in Manhattan Beach or Redondo Beach when they lived there, it was so full of books and science papers and artifacts and things that it was, to a normal person, normal meaning regular IQ person, it looked like a disaster. But to them, there was organization in their disorganization.
When they got in front of thousands of people in events that they attended, and I attended a number of events when they were there, Durk taught Sandy how to bend horseshoes, and I happen to have that in my library here. And the reason why Durk taught Sandy how to bend a horseshoe barehanded or with gloves on is because he goes, men would listen to her a lot more effectively if I taught her how to bend a horseshoe right in front of them.
Okay.
Yes.
I remember when they were doing that, and I actually saw Sandy do that back at their book time.
Mary, are you still there? We haven't heard
Yes.
from you in a while.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I was just going to comment on that horseshoe thing, because I was curious. I know they had certain supplements that Sandy took in order to be able to bend that horseshoe. And Greg, I don't know if you know, or Scott, Chris, I don't know. I don't remember which supplements those were, but I think it would be something the audience would be really interested in.
Yeah, it was probably arginine. Arginine would account for one of them, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for that, because I have to give credits to Durk's brain for teaching her the right technique on how to hold that horseshoe. It had something to do with strength, because as people can see in the Life Extension book, Sandy was extremely muscular, as was Durk in their prime. But Durk created formulas for his own personal use, and one of the formulas that Mary you would be interested in hearing about, I think, is called Muscle Memory in Life Priority's line of products, designer food. And Durk created this formula using arginine, choline, and B5 as the three main ingredients. And what the value of that formula does, and there's 6 grams of arginine per serving, not a pittance like a lot of companies out there are putting out. But what happens when someone takes that formula, hopefully on empty stomach before exercise, is that it helps the blood release a molecule called nitric oxide. And and nitric oxide allows more blood flow to get into the muscles, and it allows the muscles to recover after exercise. So that's one of the products that I as a former pro athlete, I wish I would have had it when I played, because I would have, maybe my baseball cards would look a lot better on the back,
Yes.
But when I first saw that product and I looked at the price of it, and I said to myself, this little bottle it can't be worth that much money. Well, guess what? You know, all you have to do is get it into the right athlete or a person that wants to have a little bit better workout. And you can, the great thing about a lot of the Pearson and Shaw formulas is that you can test them, put them to the test. And that's when the value comes out, because I really didn't want to be selling, I don't want to call any trade names out, but I wanted something that could really work and help people. And I found it through the designer food formulas. And there's a number of nutritional formulas that Durk and Sandy created. And there's a number of them that they created for pets. They were so smart. They could create things for pets that would take the smell out of pet feces. That it was called Nature Calls, and you put it in the pet's food, and Durk figured out how to take the smell out of pet excrements. It was I just wish that we could offer all of his formulas that he has, but sometimes marketing is the name of the game, and intelligence is still there.
So when your pets take a dump, you don't have to smell it. That would be nice. The farts are worse though. Nothing is worse. The worst farts ever are dog farts. But yeah.
Well, I thought the farts coming from the U.S. government, but I guess I'm.
Yeah. Well, you could also use science maybe to create different fragrances with farts. Like the
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people probably would really appreciate that, because if they have gastrointestinal problems, that product might help them. I mean, if you're, because obviously any smells that you have with gas are going to come from the metabolism of what's going on in the gut. And if it's not optimal, then I would expect you to have some pretty obnoxious stuff. But
I need to quit talking about this because it's not available to the public. So please don't call Life Priority and ask for it. We don't carry it, but we could if we had enough demand,
Sure.
Well, when I first met Durk and Sandy, one of their policies was for certain of the individuals, friends or acquaintances visiting their home, that he or she would have to take a certain level of niacin to get rid of their schizophrenia. And and it'd be like 3 grams a day of niacin, or 10 grams in one instance that I can recall. And they were very strict about that. Okay, Joe Blow, you can't come over until you're taking, and you have to tell us 4 grams or 5 grams of niacin a day. And they would do it because it was worth it to them, for them to be able to see Durk and Sandy. And they would give their friends this test called the Experiential World Inventory Test, the UE test. Sandy was a big believer in it. So they tested us all. They tested me.
Wow.
And they came back and they said, Scott, you won't believe this, but you tested the most emotionally stable person we've ever tested. And I said, well, that's nice. Thank you. Now get out of here.
It doesn't surprise me, Scott. You would have to be emotionally stable to do the type of work that you do.
Thank you, Mary. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
I should put out a disclaimer. This show is not medical advice. It's also not legal advice or financial advice.
Yeah, we've been visited, my wife and I, we've been visited by the FDA several times. And luckily for us, I guess you could say that with Durk and Sandy's work with Jonathan Emord back in Washington in the early days of the lawsuits against the FDA, especially the first one, the Shalala case, where they won that case. Unfortunately, a lot of their time and money was taken up with trying to get truthful information out to the public.
Yes.
And even though we know that we can't make medical claims on nutrients, but I think that with what's happening in our country now, with the importance on trying to improve the health of America, I think that some wonderful things are going to happen. And unfortunately, I wish Durk and Sandy were here to see it happen, because it's going to be there has to be a change. And I think the change is, how can we help each other live a more healthy life?
Yeah, there really wasn't a supplement industry before Durk and Sandy, was there? Or it seems like they
no, there was.
I mean, it's certainly bigger now than it was, 50 years ago.
Well, it was oriented towards life extension. Excuse me, Mary. Go ahead.
Right. I was going to say, actually, before the 1962 amendments to the Food and Drug Act, it was the pharmaceutical companies that were putting out, like Greg was saying, basically 1 a day multiple vitamins and things like that. And with the 62 amendments and having to prove effectiveness, which was incredibly expensive the way the FDA wanted you to do, that basically made it impossible to make any claims for nutrients. That's probably one of the biggest problems. And of course, as you know, the FDA was raiding health food stores. They raided Jonathan Wright, who has since become known as the bioidentical hormone guru. And it just was crazy. And I think a lot of the things the suits that Durk and Sandy brought, as well as the fact that the life extension founders fought the FDA when the FDA tried to imprison them and won, I think those two things were really important in getting us access to supplements. And even though claims officially can't be made, at least there's a little bit of window of being able to talk about what they do. For example, Greg, when you were talking about the nitric oxide, I mean, we know how important that is from other science. So I think that contribution of Durk and Sandy's was extremely important too. And of course, they worked with the Life Extension Foundation for a while and had some of their products marketed through them. And I don't think they do anymore, or haven't in recent years, but they did for a while.
Yeah, Mary, I mean, just I add to that, and I appreciate you bringing the Life Extension Foundation up. When my wife and I decided that we wanted to work with Durk and Sandy, we called them and we said, we'd like to put Life Priority, our name and your names on your formulas. Any way we can do that, because we wanted to be able to tell people the truth about where they were made, what was in them, and all things like that. And we wanted to get away from the company that we were with. So Durk put me in touch with Bill Falloon at Life Extension Foundation. And without Bill Falloon supporting what our effort was, we wouldn't be here today. And I give all honor to Life Extension Foundation, even though they don't offer Durk and Sandy's formulas anymore. They were instrumental in helping Life Priority start and flourish nationwide from 1994 to today. So last 30 years, it was started with Bill Falloon and Life Extension Foundation.
Yeah, they've been great. They really have. You're right.
Yeah.
But, let me add one more thing about what people that are brand new to Durk and Sandy, if you will. Durk was creating formulas right up into this year. We've introduced 2 new formulas. One is called V-Guard 2, and the other one is called Ageless. And I was astounded that he still had a desire to put formulas together to help some of the things inside the body that might cause people trouble. So it hasn't stopped. I mean, from day one with them through just recently, they were as eager to help people understand the value of nutrients as they've ever were. And as I said, our trip there in July when we interviewed Durk many times and video and audio, took audio tapes. They're just absolutely wonderful to listen to, because I think people should be able to understand why these people are so held high in regard to by a lot of people that are not even on this call.
Yeah. I'm curious. Did they look into any things like herbalism or even things like Amazonian plant medicines, or were they solely just looking at supplements, manufactured supplements?
I think when they wrote the book, Mary, you can go ahead and respond. Mary.
Yeah.
Well, yes. So I think at the time they wrote the book Life Extension, the focus was on nutrients, because that was what was coming into the fore, so to speak. The whole herbal expansion, I guess you could call it, didn't happen until later. And I don't know if they got interested in that later. Greg would probably know more than I.
No, I could answer that question. I could answer that question, Mary, because I was actually involved with them in even doing the research for their book, because I was hired by them to go to the UCLA Biomed Library while I was a student, and I would use the photocopying. They'd give me a list of citations, and I would go track them down. And it was pre-Google internet days. We're talking the mid 70s, going into maybe even the late 70s a little bit. But I would research. I would photocopy. I was a great user of the photocopy machine there at the Biomed Library. And I would make big stacks of papers that I would take to them at the end of the week. Well, usually I did this work on the weekend because I had 2 other jobs while I was going to school at UCLA, but this was my weekend job. And so Saturdays and Sundays, I was usually there. And a lot of that research they put into their books. And I remember at the time, Durk and Sandy's philosophy was, look, synthetic is no different than natural vitamins or nutrients. Synthetic is the same. I remember them saying that, which I actually don't agree with, but that was their philosophy. And so at the time, they weren't that interested in herbs, a little bit, but just maybe more in a hippie kind of way, if I can say that. And but they, like Greg was saying, or like you were saying, Mary, that came later with the herbal thing. In fact, I really wasn't that much aware of it, because when they did their first book and even their second book, The Life Extension Companion, it was all about nutraceuticals, just like you said, Mary. And, and in their minds, the synthetics were just as good as the natural version of whatever nutrient they were taking. So, and they worked on cofactors. Cofactor was a word that Durk either invented or used to say, look, we have vitamin C with these cofactors, or we have this formula with these cofactors, and they would go from there. But they were incredibly brilliant. They were incredibly honest in their research. If they thought they had a brilliant idea and they had me track it down at the library, and then I showed them, because I also had license to go off on a tangent. Like if I saw a paper and it quoted another paper that they hadn't put on the list for me to get, I had complete authority to go get that one and throw it into the mix. And that's what I did. And so if they saw they were going down the wrong trail, they admitted it. They didn't just stubbornly keep plodding forward. No, it looks like this is the wrong approach, Sandy. We've got to do this. Or Sandy would say, Durk, we're doing the wrong thing. We need to consider this. And so they were quite honest about it.
They were dead set against people that smoked. In fact, if people that have read the Life Extension book know this, there's a chapter in that book that they spent the whole chapter on telling people what to take to counteract the bad effects of smoking.
Yeah, they had they had a little, before their big book, they had a little booklet put out by Kurt Donsbach that was about smoking. And it was entirely written by Durk and Sandy, but it was a Donsbach book. And yes, it was exactly that, Greg. It was saying, look, one of the research things I found for them, copied for them, I didn't find it, they found it, was a research study. I think it was in Michigan. And it showed that they had studied something like 10,000 people. And if they had smokers, they had various control groups, and they had these smokers. And if they found that if the smoker ate a medium-sized, didn't have to be a big one, but larger than a small one, medium-sized raw carrot every day, it would completely put them at the same risk level as a non-smoker for lung cancer. All they had to do was eat a raw, medium-sized carrot a day. It was an interesting study, and it's one I think is mentioned in that book behind you, Greg, The Life Extension, a Practical Scientific Approach.
Yeah, I wish I could say I've read every page of it, but I just leave it up to Durk and Sandy. When I have them, I didn't need to read it, really.
No, you didn't. You wouldn't. No.
But one thing that we haven't talked about that I would like to just mention, and I'm sure all of you are aware of this, Durk and Sandy were so engrossed into neurotransmitters and how we can create a proper neurotransmitter activity in the brain. And And even in July, when Durk was doing his interviews with us, I was like, I'm so amazed at his recall. He never stuttered on anything. And, you know, it's easy for a genius to do stuff like that. But for people that are trying to expand their life mentally and keep their mental capabilities, you know, there's many things that Durk and Sandy promoted that would help make acetylcholine and things like that in their formulas, and it's so much fun to be able to share that with people. I didn't want to make this any kind of a sales pitch on my company, but for me to find things that would help create neurotransmitters for my own brain, it was great, because my grandpa had dementia, my dad had dementia, and hopefully on this call you won't think that I have dementia. Okay?
No,
you don't know. You know, I just wondered, did they do any, you know, studies of nutrition? Because there's certainly been a lot of, you know, bad myths promoted, you know, in the 70s and 80s. You know, one being fat bad, carbohydrates good. Did they look into that at all, or?
They did, at least when I knew them, they did, and they didn't buy into the myth about saturated fats. They thought it was a big hype from the margarine industry to get people away from butter and saturated fats. And in fact, they've been proven right many decades later.
My wife just arrived from her appointment that she couldn't get out of, and I want to put her on the screen with me. So pardon me for just a second. I'm going to introduce you to my wife, Michelle Pryor, who is the queen of our company.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining us.
Mary's, her screen is dark, but she can hear you.
Hi.
And then Scott.
Hi.
We're not supposed to tell anybody where Scott is today. Okay. It's Europe. In Europe.
How long have you two been together?
45 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she was not happy when I brought the designer foods home. She was not happy at all. But
let me guess,
she loves Durk and Sandy more than anybody, probably because they've meant so much to us and a lot of our friends and family.
So you both got to go there and visit them in July last, right?
Absolutely.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
I was invited to go, and like I said earlier, I didn't take them up on it, and I really, truly regret it now.
You know, it was fascinating, Scott. I have been so blessed by Durk and Sandy. In fact, I consider Durk my mentor in helping me learn a lot of things about the nutrition industry. And one of the things I knew about Durk is that he understood, and if I needed questions, he was like the Wizard of Oz. He could give me, you know, analyze it, give me the answers. And there's a lot of stuff out there that people are pushing that maybe is more marketing than actually fact or, you know, based on truly helping people. But I mean, I was fortunate enough to call Durk as often as I wanted, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week, and listen to him laugh and everything. My last conversation with him on October, I think it was 14th, was he was so excited because he just found a new avenue to help with a particular thing that he was working on. And he said he was going to be doing great, feeling better. And, you know, it was just really a privilege and an honor because, number one, they were so black and white, so honest and so sincere that more than business partners, they were friends, and they were great friends. And I mean, look at you guys and all the people you know, the vast amount of people that Durk and Sandy could communicate with and really cared about making a difference is just absolutely phenomenal. I am heartbroken, and I so many things that I used to ask Durk for, you know, information and insight. I'm like, where is my honest go-to Wizard of Oz guy?
Yeah, it's so well said, Michelle. That's so true. And when you said the mentoring part, it reminded me of how I got into food and drug law, because I was always interested in nutrition since I was quite young. And then I had just graduated from Bolt Hall, Berkeley Law School. And Durk suggested just a throw-out comment, that lasted maybe a minute or something. Scott, you're interested in nutrition and you're now an attorney. Why don't you go into food and drug law?
And you did.
And that's how I got started. I did, right. Thank you, Mary. And I did. And it was
one of the good guys.
Yeah, it's an idea that Durk threw out there.
Yeah. Sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to say is that when, I first met Durk in August 1969, and then I didn't really see him or even stay in touch with him for long, except through the publication that they had. I don't know how many of you know they had the Libertarian Connection.
Right.
And this
we met them in Vegas at a Libertarian Party convention one time.
Yeah, but this is a pre-Libertarian Party publication.
Okay.
And it was called the Libertarian Connection, and they started it. He had the name Sky D'Aureus because he didn't want to have Durk Pearson associated with it. And Sandy Shaw had the name Natalie Hall. So it was Natalie Hall and Sky D'Aureus, and we kind of all sniggered and knew who it really was, but at least for the outside world, they didn't, presumably. And what would happen is you would subscribe to this publication. You would type up, this pre-computer days, you would type up something you would want to submit. And it was a collection of articles written by the subscribers. It was very unique. And they would mimeograph it all together, staple it on the spine, and then mail it out to all the subscribers. And, for years I carted around boxes of these issues. And then sadly enough, when I was moving internally here in Europe, the movers, without my knowledge, threw that box away, or two boxes away. And so I lost all of that, which would be worth something these days, I think, historically at least. And Erwin Strauss, who was the other one we were talking about before, Greg, who was the other top scorer for the GRE the year after Durk's top score, he took it over and he struck the name Libertarian from it, and he called it the Connection. And I was trying, Chris knows this, I was trying to get Filthy Pierre, was Erwin Strauss's nickname, trying to get Filthy Pierre to appear on our program. I think he's still alive because I last tracked him down to December of last year, December 2023. And he could tell us stories about Durk as well, because he was really close with him for a number of years.
Now, do any of you, any of you met Jack Wheeler or know of Jack Wheeler?
Yeah, I know who he is.
Jack Wheeler owes me money. So if you see that guy, I want
we know how to get in touch with him.
Yeah.
Jack was affected by Durk's passing in a big way because, unbeknownst to us, Durk wrote under a pen name Sky, S-K-Y-E.
Well, that's it. I said Sky D'Aureus.
Yeah, and now Jack is not happy that there'd be no more articles for all of his readers for To the Point newsletter that Durk used to write for Jack's publication.
I didn't know Jack had a publication other than his book that he came out with ages ago. What publication does he have?
It's called To the Point. Just search for Jack Wheeler, To the Point, and I'm sure you'll find it. So he's based out of Virginia. He publishes out of Virginia.
Is he still married to Rebel Holiday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's traveling the world. Our youngest daughter and her husband went on an excursion with Jack Wheeler. So we'll tell Jack to get in touch with you about that debt he owes you.
Yeah. Well, he'd probably as soon forget about it. But Jack's quite a character. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
But he's kind of what his last name is. He's a freewheeling kind of guy. And he was a very close and dear friend of Durk and Sandy's. And he used to brag about Jack to me at times. Jack went to the North Pole. He was the youngest guy to go to the North Pole, or first guy to parachute over the North Pole. And, he went to the Amazon and lived with a cannibalistic headhunting tribe. And he was the first white man they had ever seen. and all these different adventures. In fact, in my home, I can't show it to you now, but in my home, I have, which I bought from Jack Wheeler, or Jack Wheeler gave me as part of his debt, I think. It's hard to describe what it is, but it's wooden and it's very long. It's at least 2 or 3 yards long, and it's flat. And it came from a Papua New Guinea headhunting tribe, and he had gotten it, and it was decorative. It's just for display, and they usually hang it on their walls. Well, I have it sitting on a bookcase at this very moment, and that came from one of Jack's adventures. But yeah, Jack's quite the guy.
I'll send you when we're done with the call. I'll send you what Jack wrote about Durk's passing. I think you'd really.
Oh, I'd love to see it. Yeah, I would, because I wrote something, and then Jonathan Emord wrote an in memoriam as well. And so ours is being published in the National Health Federation publication called Health Freedom News. And we also sent it out to our e-list as well, as did Whole Foods Magazine, which...
we read that. Now, one thing that Michelle touched on, I just want to make sure that all the listeners are aware of is the following. Durk Pearson had one of the best laughs you could ever want. He loved to laugh, and he would laugh at himself, and he would use old hippie phrases like "far out, man, far out," and it was almost like I'm dealing with somebody I went to high school with, because I went to high school in the '60s and when Durk was at MIT, but he had a great way of breaking the mundane intelligence level that he had. With a laugh that would just make you want to melt.
Yeah.
Do we have his laugh on recorded?
Yeah, it's on the interview with Life Priority Products from October of this year, right? Or last year, October 2020.
And when we went to go visit Durk in July, we told him we were coming. Then, it's like every week, what day, what time, we got together. He was so excited that we were coming. We actually did 22 different interviews on the Durk and Sandy Designer Foods, so that in Durk's own words, they could be explained, because nobody can do the science like Durk can. And, that was our goal, is that Life Priority would always protect and continue their legacy, because when we started, we were the smallest company. But our hearts with Durk and Sandy and the products. Greg's 75, I'm 71, and I know our health wouldn't be what it is. And we've helped so many people, and that's the key. For us, it was about doing the right thing and giving people real products, because Durk knew what it took to keep people healthy. And there were numerous times that different clients that we had health issues, and Durk would have some research done and come back to us with different ideas, thought processes, and suggestions. So we feel that Life Priority, God willing, will be a preservation of their original formulas, the products, the life extension news things that they wrote, and hopefully just be honorable to Durk and Sandy as long as God willing.
That's wonderful. And maybe I could ask the question that's on everyone else's mind. It's certainly on mine. And you may not be able to say it, but I know everyone's asking, what did Durk and what did Sandy die from?
That's a great question, Scott, and it has not been fully disclosed at this point. So I think it would be premature. The thing I can tell you is after Sandy passed away, Durk they were like salt and pepper, and Durk just wasn't exactly the same. And
I wondered about that.
Yeah,
so
it took a toll.
Was he depressed, or was he depressed?
He was lonely, and he wasn't taking as good a care of himself as he could have.
He didn't share too much about her passing when she passed with us. He didn't share that much with us when we saw him in July in northern Nevada. But that I just feel, and we'd like to give you a better answer, Scott. It's a question that we've been asked by a lot of our people that know that we know them, and we're not trying to evade anything. But in my personal opinion is that losing Sandy really took its toll on him. You know,
I'm sure you're right.
You know, I have no doubt that he lost his appetite to a certain extent. And, you know, it's, I don't know if his desire to continue was as great as it was when she was alive, but I think that her passing had an effect on him.
I've seen that happen to a lot of men, unfortunately. I got to ask, who is their next of kin?
That's a wonderful question. There's a lot of things that are still being sorted out.
Yeah.
Greg and I are fortunate enough that we do know some of the people that Durk was close with in that particular area. And, you know, things will come out. But, you know, as long as we knew Durk and Sandy for over 30 years, I didn't know he had any relatives. And
unfortunately, they didn't adopt Michelle and I.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, well, generally hospitals are, you know, they have to be very private with that kind of information. And unless you can prove your family, I mean, you know, it's possible that they're never going to tell anybody. But
well, really, someone's going to have to look to the will, presumably.
The will, if there is one. Yeah, there's a lot of complications here. I mean, having, you know, dealt with my brother's death, there's a lot of complications, you know, with wills. I mean, depending on the state, you know, I mean, you know.
The one thing I can say is that during the first years that I knew Durk and Sandy, Sandy had salivary gland cancer. And it's talked about in the book behind you and Michelle, Greg, there. And it's talked about, and I remember them discussing it with me, and they were very proud of the fact, as they should be, that by Sandy taking a mix of antioxidants, which included BHT, by the way, that she had been told after the radiation treatment of her salivary gland that she would lose her hearing immediately. Well, it took 15 years for it to start degrading or deteriorating. So, and then when I knew her in the later years, you know, and later years for me, 70s, 80s, starting the 90s, her hearing had gotten kind of bad, but she hung in there, and she was still very communicative and all that. Durk could understand her, of course. But it was maybe that cancer had come back in Sandy or something, or cancer.
Yeah.
After they did that procedure, which was highly speculative, she had another 40 very viable, good years.
Yes.
She was given no time, to be very honest. And so the research that they did, the things that they were able to challenge, I mean, you know, they lived life to the fullest. And we all know what their slogan was: live long and prosper. And
gee, where'd they get that?
Yep.
Well, it's just a shame. I expected them to live longer, but you know what? It's always relative. Like we were saying before the program started, my father died at a quite young age. If I were to die right now at my age, people would say, "Oh, he died young." But comparative with my family genetics, I've actually lived quite a longer time, and I attribute that to the nutrient intakes that I've had over the years. You know, for that.
Yeah, sorry for the echo. I don't know. Maybe it's Michelle's phone that's on. I turned my phone off.
My phone's off.
Yeah,
it should be okay.
I don't know why we're having a little echo. Hopefully, it's not interfering with too much. But
you sound fine. You sound fine to me.
You sound fine. One thing to add some levity, maybe some fun to this conversation about them is. On a previous trip that I made to visit Durk and Sandy a few years back, Durk looked at me and he said, "Greg, how would you like to take a drive up to my ghost town, old mining town that I own?" And I said, "That sounds great." So we took off in an unconditioned in a Bronco without air conditioning in the summer heat of Nevada, and we drove an hour to this mining town.
Mm.
And when I got there, there was nothing there. I mean, it was right on the border of the government land, which most Nevada's government land anyway. And the bank was there. The jail was there. The store was there. It was dilapidated, but knowing that people lived there and Durk and Sandy owned that property was so exciting, because every step you take on the pebbles, it seemed like they exploded. It was so quiet. There was no noise at all. And it was such a wonderful experience to know that they were interested in, and I don't even know why they own that land, because nobody was going to build on it. I don't know if it was they were going to do any more mining there or not, but it was really fun to see that old mining town that Durk owned.
Yeah. You know, incidentally, I never thought of it. Since they were in Nevada, did they ever get up to Burning Man?
You know, I don't know about that, but I do know from one of Durk's friends, because, you know, Durk got involved in that BLM management with the rancher thing, and Durk loved being a cowboy. He bragged about going out and branding the cattle with the cattlemen when they were doing stuff, so he could check over his herd of cattle. I mean, he was just such an incredibly diverse individual. And every single time I learned some wonderful piece of information that I never thought about. And, you know, that's one of the treasures I think we'll all miss with him being gone.
Yeah. I saw that picture, you know, of them both wearing a cowboy hat. Yeah, it wasn't something I expected, but it's funny how people get into those things. Yeah.
Durk's not the kind of a person that would wear a tie. I don't think he owned a tie, you know?
Yeah.
You read my mind, Greg. I was about to say that he was very proud of the bolo tie that he had. And in fact, during one of our business meetings, I think it was at the Jonathan Club in LA, a very exclusive club at the time, still exclusive, but particularly so back then. As we entered, he was told that he had to put on this silly clip-on tie that they had, you know, to be able to enter. And he said, look, I'm wearing a bolo tie, and it's probably about 8 times more expensive than that thing you're handing me. I think I should be allowed to go in with my bolo tie. And they acquiesced, and yes, he went in and conducted his meeting there. And I'm pretty sure it's Jonathan Club, but anyway, it was some snooty place in LA, some restaurant club. But yeah, he was very informal. He didn't like to dress up. I never saw him in a suit and tie that I can remember, at least.
Well, eating dinner with Durk and Sandy was always a great event, because they were like they loved to smell their food. Whenever they got served anything, they would take time to smell their food very close to their nose. And then they had a product that they would sprinkle on top of the food that would cause the flavors to really burst from whatever they were eating. And so they had it all down. I mean, they loved to smell and swish wine around before they drank it. They were flavor chemists, and they were food connoisseurs.
Yeah, they sure were.
After they ate, I mean, we had our 2 daughters with us at the dinner when it was a Ruth Chris Steakhouse in Las Vegas, and Durk and Sandy bring out their handful of vitamins, and literally they 12 to 16 different vitamins that they were taking after their meal. And it was amazing, because they really practice what they preach. And I know it was an eye-opener for my own daughters to see, you know, how in fact, my kids wanted them to adopt them. They'd rather have them than parents.
That's so true. They lived what they preached. That's very well put.
Yeah.
And you know, they liked to have snakes where they lived. They had snakes, I guess you could say, for pets. And they raised mice to feed to their snakes.
Yeah.
And it was
I kind of remember something like that. I thought it was a lizard, but maybe it was a snake. My memory isn't so good on that point. And yeah.
But I wish we had Jonathan on here to talk about some of the legal.
Yeah.
What
happened with him? He went silent on the emails.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, there's always be time for another call, because hopefully, this call can be looked at by people, but their lives were so huge that it's very difficult for just us to bring light to as many things as these people.
Okay. I can throw in a couple of extra things if you're interested. One is our mutual friend Bill Capron, who was starting a company called Life Extension Software or something, Life Extension the Software. And he was in negotiations with Durk and Sandy for that. They were basically going to computerize the book and make it available. I don't know what came of that, but there were a lot of extensive discussions on that. Bill Capron was living in San Francisco at the time, so there were numerous meetings both in San Francisco and in LA, depending upon who traveled where. And so that was one aspect of Durk and Sandy's life. The other thing was in the early 70s, just kind of throw this out there, 1973, Filthy Pierre, i.e. Erwin Strauss, and I were going to start a gambling ship operation off the coast of Southern California. And this is where we'd use this all pre-internet days. So we were going to be in international waters, take betting on sporting events, football games, baseball games by Citizens Band radio. We even did tests to see what the range would be from international waters. It'd be supplied out of not Tijuana, but Ensenada, be resupplied out of Ensenada, so never be put ashore. And Durk and Sandy, mainly Durk, were giving a lot of advice on how to do this to Filthy and to me. And this is when, I'd met them in 1969. I was involved with the Libertarian Connection, but I never saw them personally after that time in St. Louis, Missouri. And then when this started up, I had to go to LA in the summer, August of 73. And that's when I got introduced really to Durk and Sandy, visiting their home, all of this stuff, and getting to really know them was in kind of the late summer, early fall of 1973. And they were quite interesting people. There's stories I could tell you, but I'm not going to, because I want this to be a tribute to their memory. And it's nothing that reflects badly on them. It's just some people might think it's strange or something, but they were definitely unique individuals. And they were always interested in helping people. They were tremendously generous with their time. Time is money, and yet for them, they were the most generous people I ever met with their advice and their wisdom and their thoughts and their general helpfulness. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in so I didn't before I forgot to talk about it.
Well, and I'd like to share something, if you don't mind. One of Durk's passions was brain health and brain aging. And when we did the interviews with Durk, if you listen to those interviews, they are spot on. And I was asking and teasing Durk whether or not we needed to get him a teleprompter. And just laughed. But all of those interviews are just totally in his head. And the way that the brain can slow down the aging process and keep the cognition. Both he and Sandy cognitive were like spot on to the very, very end.
Yeah, it's true. It kind of reminds me of that Star Trek episode where Dr. McCoy walks by Spock, who's just standing in the hallway, just looking off into space. And he says to Spock, "Don't you think you ought to be working or doing something?" He said, "I am working. I'm doing interstellar calculations on, whatever it was." And that was Durk also. He worked from his bed. He created a special thing where he could wheel the lap table in front of him. It was on some kind of gimbal device. and he would have his little keypad there and he'd type away while he was in bed. I mean, he was always thinking.
Mhm.
You know, when the global warming, I want to call it the phenomenon, if you will, to be kind, happened, the first person I called was Durk.
Yeah.
I said, Durk, give me the skinny, you know?
Yeah.
And, you'll have to pay me to get the answer from me about what he said.
You know, I gotta ask. Yeah, I haven't heard from Mary in a while, but what was Durk and Sandy's reaction to what was going on in early 2020?
Are you referring to the COVID and all that?
Yes.
You know, that's a wonderful question because one of the products that Durk created was an immune support product. And Durk was confused by the science that he'd seen and was evolving.
They didn't get vaccinated. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
He told us to be very, very careful of what we said because of the ramifications of taking any stance that wasn't being pushed, I guess is the word. So he advised us to be cautious, keep trying to encourage people to stay as healthy as possible, and refer that to people's medical advisors. But and that's the hard part, because where Durk had taken on the FDA in 1994, through the COVID thing, we all know that things dramatically changed. And it's much more difficult to take any type of opposing opinion or even present it and not have some repercussions.
Over the years that we knew him, and it's a good question, Chris, and thanks for asking. Durk was very wary of giving any kind of medical advice on anything because of his problems, with the FDA, and I can understand why. So, we can count on one hand the things that we approached him about in regards to maybe a friend of ours that had cancer, and see if Durk had any ideas on what to do or what not to do. And but he was very guarded with his stances because he was afraid of being taped and have it be held against him. He goes, you can't tape me if I'm going to be talking to any doctors. I don't want it taped. I don't want it spread around. And so he was pretty cautious about protecting his. He just didn't want to get back in the courtroom. I think he was fed up with the way that they came after him in the courts, or the way he went after other people in the courts.
Well, and he also had trouble with the IRS. They didn't allow this wonderful library he had to be deducted as part of his research for the book Life Extension. And I think that set him back a long ways because, of course, they invested so much in that library. I think Scott probably knows even better than I how much they had. And
they had a lot, Mary, you're right.
Yeah, and then not to be allowed to use that deduction to offset the costs, not the costs, but the royalties on the book. That would have been really hard on them financially, and I believe it was.
Oh wow!
From what they told me.
Yeah.
So I can see why they're so cautious about getting involved with anything government. After the lawsuits and everything with the FDA, and then having to drag the FDA back into court to actually, make them do what the courts said they were supposed to do. I can see where they were very hesitant, and that was probably a good thing because it sounded like they did have a target on their back.
Yeah. He told us to call Jonathan E. Mord with any legal questions we had. So, it didn't hurt our feelings. It made me respect him because he just wanted to stay out of the middle of things that he probably couldn't win. He could only lose,
Well, I can imagine they would have objected to all the scaremongering that was going on.
Yeah, well, I know even as late as last week, they're still censoring talks about COVID because so you've got to be careful if you want stuff to stay out.
Yeah.
Very good point.
It's horrible what they're doing now. I don't know, but that's another topic. But yeah, I sense also that is it fair to say that Durk and Sandy were usually the first people to use a new technology, like they were the. When did they get on the internet, for example?
Well, if I could say they were often the first to propose a new technology, because Durk was actually a great synthesizer, as was Sandy, but in a different way. Like he could remember something that he had read 10 years ago, and then something else comes up, and then there's a third publication that mentions another study, and he could synthesize all of that into an idea, and even a business idea, a business concept that could be done. And he was really a genius at doing that.
Well, I mean,
Scott, I will tell you that over the years, he seldom brought us any kind of investment advice, except that we should move to where they lived in Nevada as soon as we could, and bring as much gas as possible.
Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking. Like when did they get on the internet? When did they get an email address? When did they get a cell phone?
Well, I can kind of answer that because one of the three close friends of theirs, I was one of them. Another individual named Rod Manis was the other, and he became a friend of mine as well. I think I was introduced to him. No, I met Rod independently of Durk and Sandy, but in any event, Rod, I remember visiting him at his Mountain View home in Northern California. And he said, Scott, look at this. This is like the early 80s. He said, I can communicate from here with Bell Labs in Edison, New Jersey, just by typing messages to them, and they get them instantly, and then they can write me right back. I was like, oh, get out of here. Why don't you just pick up the phone and call them,
Terminal email. Yes.
Yeah. So I know that Rod he was very close with Durk and Sandy. Rod died June 1st, 1988, but before his death, he was very close with Durk and Sandy, and I'm sure they communicated about all of this. So I think Durk was probably one of the first on, and this is well before the World Wide Web was really created and all of that stuff. So
yeah, that's what I was wondering. I figured they might have been early on that, but also being out there in Nevada, it might have been hard to get that. So
Durk collected gold, and I guess in the last 2 years, he called us up and he said, I found a way that people can get value out of their gold. And he explained the process of doing it. And without giving this idea for free to anybody that might be listening right now, I'll be glad to maybe tell you alone. But he had it all figured out. And I have little doubt that it would work. Based on how Durk said to set it up, so people could borrow from their gold supply, and it had to do with banks. It had to do with the state of Texas, and he said, all we need to do is go buy a bank in South Dakota and set this deal up.
Maybe so. This show is not financial advice. That makes me wonder: Did Durk have any Did Durk and Sandy have any Bitcoin?
Don't know that.
I don't either.
Or were what they thought of Bitcoin?
We never got into that with them. I think all he wanted to talk about was gold.
Mm-hmm. They were pretty much hard money people, like Harry Schultz, and they knew of Harry Schultz. They'd been put in touch with him. He was the big financial guru for decades, who died last year, February in fact, Valentine's Day last year, 2023. But That's an excellent question you asked, Chris, because now you have me curious what they thought about Bitcoin.
We could probably find that out. We'll let you know.
I'm just, it seems like they were high tech people. I just,
we never told you that Durk and Sandy traveled from Nevada to come to Kansas City for an event, and they were sitting at the back of the arena. Hundreds and hundreds of people were there waiting to hear him talk. And when I went up and was going to say hi to them, they looked like they had been through the makeup shop. And I said, "You guys look so healthy." She said, and Durk said, "Well, we're wearing one of our formulas that we created for our own skin." Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they had skin products. But what they did is when they got up in front of people in the audience, they said, "Look, there might be a lot of questions that people might want to ask us." They said, "We're going to pass out index cards. We want everybody to write their questions down on an index card." And they took up the index cards to the front of the room, and Durk was flipping through them, and if he thought it was an interesting question, he would respond to it. So I thought that was an interesting way to speed the process up.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that makes me wonder: were they well traveled, or did they pretty much stay in the U.S.?
I think the book tour with Warner Books took it out of them. They got used to because when they got in their home there in northern Nevada, they were completely free to do anything they want. There was no building codes where they lived. There was no, Sandy was involved with the local politics, but I don't think they really liked traveling because we told them, we said, we want you to come back to Kansas City. And Durk had said, "Well, we'll need this and that and this and that and this and that." And I'm thinking, wait a minute. they wanted paid well to travel, and they liked living in where they lived.
Travel is a lot more fun when you control it. I mean, when everything is booked for you, it really sucks.
Yeah. Well, I never heard of Durk and Sandy traveling outside the U.S. So in the time that I knew them, maybe they did, but I don't think they did.
Their formulas were marketed in Mexico, and Michelle and I went down to Oaxaca to an event of 5,000 people, and they had an interpreter, and they were promoting their formulas.
Oh, so they made it to Mexico?
Yes.
Okay.
Oaxaca do you mean OAXACA?
You spelled. You're smarter than me.
Isn't it Oaxaca?
Yeah,
Oaxaca. Yeah. Southeastern Mexico.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing because that's actually a state that banned selling Coke and Pepsi to kids.
Interesting.
And as a libertarian, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Right. Well, one interesting story that I have that sticks out in my mind is I think it was 1998. There was a Nobel Prize won for arginine in cardiovascular health. And it was, a real big deal. And Greg knew an owner of a vitamin company who wanted to talk to Durk. And one of the scientists, Lou Ignarro, that had won that, been on the recipient of the Nobel Prize, we got to listen to he and Durk discuss the value of arginine. And, Durk had a product that he'd had for many years with arginine in it. And, it was just fascinating to see how all the connections could be. And I mean, here was this guy that Durk wanted to talk to Durk because actually, in my opinion, Durk knew more than what he knew.
Yeah. This is
three doctors that got the Nobel Prize for how nitric oxide acts as a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. And my friend that I mentioned before Michelle got here that marketed the Your Life vitamins nationwide, Dave Brubaker, he called me and he goes, "Greg, I want to get Durk Pearson and Dr. Louis Ignarro on the phone together." And I'm thinking, well, I'll call Durk. And I said, "Durk, you got a Nobel Prize winner that wants to talk to you about your book and, nitric oxide." And Durk said, "Oh, no problem." So we got them together. And then the end result was that Durk was not happy that everything that Durk told him, they went and used with a competing product to his. So he was not happy with the company. I'm trying to think of the name of the company.
It doesn't matter.
It was Herbalife, I think. I think it was Herbalife that came out with an arginine formula based on the conversations. And Ignaro was getting a royalty from a competing nitric oxide producer.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Well, you know, one of the things that was interesting, because we all know that there's a lot of stuff that goes around, but when Durk put his book out there in the public domain, it negated a lot of so-called proprietary trademark stuff that could have happened, specifically in the area about nitric oxide and arginine. So, I mean, them putting that out there as, you know, in the public domain for everybody to have access pretty well gave it an open book. I mean, it's phenomenal.
You mean patent? You mean
Well,
patent, not trade?
Let me add. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think Michelle means patent, not trademark.
Patent. Durk and Sandy created a product that helps create noradrenaline in the brain using certain nutrients, a little bit of caffeine, but phenylalanine is another nutrient in there. And when we got involved with that company back in '91, it was as a former ball player that tried to use anything to get more mentally prepared to play games every night. I knew it worked. The guy that was running the company that we joined, he started a company called Advocare, and Advocare was very, very well known. And he took some of the proprietary information from that and created a product into Advocare using some of Durk's technology in that product that we call Lift. Right now, it's in our company. It's called Lift, L-I-F-T, or Lift Caps. We have it in capsules too. So, if anybody's interested in creating more noradrenaline, we can certainly help them.
Well, you know, you reminded me, Greg, when you said that, of one of the two drugs that very safe drugs that Durk and Sandy were keen on in the 70s, and that is vasopressin. Diapid is the brand name, but the generic name is vasopressin. It's a nose spray, and it increases your reflexes and does some other things. And then Hydergine, Hydergine, especially the sublingual form. It comes in three forms: injectable, swallow it, or sublingual. They were real keen on the 3 milligram sublingual tablets because it puts so much oxygen into your brain that it really protected it. In fact, someone who had taken 3 milligrams of Hydergine a day for a month, if they were, say, strolling along the ocean front and they fell in, knocked their head, instead of having 5 minutes of struggle to get people out in time and save their lives and prevent irreparable brain damage, they'd have a relatively leisurely 45 minutes to do so because there's so much oxygen in the brain. And they were saying to me before I took the bar exam in California, they said, you ought to be on these two products. So I took both products before the bar exam, and I remember celebrating after the bar exam, and I had so much vasopressin that, they had those old games in the pizza parlors or places, the Galaxian and Space Invaders, now it's on your phone, but back then they were the big standalone units. And I remember I was scoring such a high score because of the vasopressin influence. People were gathered around me. Wow, wow, wow. And I'd like to say it's me, but no, it was Durk and Sandy's advice to take this vasopressin and the Hydergine. So Hydergine.
I'll just add one more thought to that. When I met Durk and got to know him the first 5 or 10 years, I was interested in his thoughts on marijuana, and because I asked him directly. He goes in the 60s. He says I predicted marijuana was going to be legalized within the next 4 or 5 years. He says I can't believe it's taken this long. That was his thought.
Yeah.
You know,
They were not anti-marijuana people at all. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
And also being libertarians, they felt other people should be free to take it or not as they wish. And they were very consistent in their political philosophy and their practice of those ideas.
Well, to his credit, I never saw him smoking a joint in front of me, you know?
Yeah. Did they have any opinions on psychedelics or things like that?
Yeah, they did, and they were fine with them. I'm pretty sure Durk took some psychedelics at one time or another when he was younger.
That's probably where his love of bow ties came from.
Yeah, could be. But they...
So Mary, are you there, Mary?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, tell. I want to hear. I'd love to see your face.
I know. I would love to show
No,
it, but
it's okay. but you tell me a story about how you met Durk and why you wanted to be on this call. So that I just haven't heard you say much about that yet. I don't think.
Well, as I indicated earlier, of course, they had a big influence on my own personal health. I mean, I'm 75 and I'm doing pretty well. And if you could see me, you probably would agree. But for some reason, my video camera is not working as it should today. But I also, Durk and Sandy were always very generous with me. I mean, I didn't see them as much as you guys did. I wasn't in their life as much as you were. But because we shared the science, I think we just had a mutual respect. And of course, I did take a lot of their products when they were with Life Extension. I regret that I wasn't aware that you were into that, Greg. But I think we were in touch several times about different things. I do remember talking to them a great deal about the IRS situation. If I knew what I knew now, after I've been audited many times myself, I would have suggested they might want to fight that. I don't know that they really did that effectively. And that probably was because it happened really early on. You may be more aware of what they did than I was, but I do remember we had a very long discussion about how disappointed they were that they couldn't get the IRS to give them that deduction. And now that I've had much more life experience, I know that they really should have. And so I really admired them a lot. And I used like I said, I'm still taking their shake more or less, although of course it's morphed over the years into something. And I believe that is really a large part of why I have aged as gracefully as I have, in spite of a lot of sports injuries. I seem to recover pretty well. I'm not doing a lot of the things that people are promoting today, like intermittent fasting and things of that nature. I have, instead just elected to do something closer to caloric restriction. And of course, again, taking the nutrients that they recommended, which I've done really since, I guess I'm trying to think of the timing here, but since my college years. So I've been at it a long time. And again, I just respect them so much for the level of science that they had back at a time, as Scott was telling us, when it was so hard to get to those papers, because today you simply go on the internet and you find these things. But back then it was really, really tough. When I started, we didn't even have copy machines. We had to take notes, which was really, really horrendous.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Mary. We have info sheets on all of our products. If you want to go look at lifepriority.com, you're welcome to go look, and email or call Michelle and I whenever you want, Mary.
Yes, and I will be in touch. Like I said, I'm so glad actually to hear that their products live on in your store.
Well, and here's the exciting part is we, with Durk, ended up creating a partnership with the guy who manufactures our products. And Dale is the original one that Durk taught to make those formulas. So, we've been able to keep that integrity and the quality. And that was something that was key for us because we're not scientists or experts on that field, but we have bottles from every batch go to Durk for his own personal review and analysis.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, I recall with the conversation we've had today, I now recall taking arginine when I was younger, but I think I was young enough that perhaps it didn't seem to have as much great effect on me, possibly because I was already in a very good place because I had taken this shake that they had recommended, and was in pretty good health, and I didn't have my sports injuries at that time either. So
what sports did you play, Mary?
Well, I played racquetball. I water skied and trick skied. My first big injury was actually riding a racehorse. I took a tumble, and I broke my foot, but that wasn't the big injury. The big injury was it changed my gait, so I started having back problems. And it's just recently I found someone who can manipulate the fascia and the muscles in such a way that now I'm walking normally and don't have back problems, but my foot, which was broken in that fall, it is really had a hard time readjusting. So it's still a little swollen. So a lot of things like that. So now I'm thinking, hey, I should be going back to the Durk and Sandy formulas because now, as opposed to when I was younger, I'm not in as good shape as I was then. And maybe that would help me. So actually, I did write down the website, and I'll be going to it shortly after this call.
Great. Thank you.
Did Durk and Sandy play any sports?
No, all I think he did was put up barbed wire on to keep his cows in the pasture. I think that's the extent of his exercise, I think.
Yeah, I think they told me they were pretty sedentary. And what's amazing is they did so well as they did.
Yeah.
I find my body needs great amounts of exercise. So
they were pretty sedentary, but what they do a lot of times is lift weights. They kept weights. And
Durk talked about the Denham Harmon in the theory of aging back in MIT, and Durk talked about how the body puts out oxidants when you exercise. So I don't know whether that was his justification for not going out and running 5 miles or not, but he was pretty sedentary.
It could be. The one person we haven't spoken about who was influential in Durk and Sandy's life as well as Dr. Harry Demopoulos in New York City. And he was a guy who was applying antioxidant formulas that he had concocted to comatose patients. And he was bringing them out of the comas by doing so. In fact, so much so that the university, I think it was New York State University, but I'm not sure. The university got angry at Harry Demopoulos and told him, look, you are either going to be fired or you're going to stop doing this because you're jeopardizing the fundraising that we get from the families of these patients. And so I think he ended up quitting. But I know Harry and Durk and Sandy were in communication. Yeah. And Harry's mentioned in the book behind you guys there, the life extension book, but it was a critical kind of turning point, I think, for Durk and Sandy at the time. And we discussed it a bit, and they, like I said, put it in the book there about this experience with Harry Demopoulos. But they looked up to Harry as a kind of pioneer in what he was doing, and a courageous doctor who tried to defy the medical times and their restrictions, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Did Durk and Sandy always work on their own, or did they work for some companies early in their careers?
Well, when I first met Durk, he was working for TRW on their Death Laser project. I remember him telling me about it back at the time. I think that was in the early 70s. And he was always sought after by high-tech military, oriented companies.
Yeah, he was hired by the government to work on space shots.
Space shots?
Space shots, yeah. And
like
also,
shots of alcohol you take in space or what? I mean, what?
and there was a plutonium spill in Nevada, and the only person they could find in the state that was qualified to go to the spill was Durk Pearson. Yeah.
Interesting that Durk got into that stuff too. It's not really quite nutrition science, but yeah. What did Sandy do? It seems like we've talked a lot more about Durk than about Sandy.
Yeah. Sandy was like I mentioned, they were like salt and pepper. Durk was kind of the calm, logical. Sandy was the fiery writer, the cause proof writer. When we would come out with one of their products, the manufacturer would review it, Greg would review it, Durk would review it, I would review it, and Sandy would find the errors that none of us could find. I mean, she was a flavor chemist. I mean, she was just the sweetest, kindest person that you can imagine. And she adored Durk, and he adored her. I loved watching. In fact, if you did see our tribute, it's the two of them pointing their fingers together with the sun. He could start a sentence, she could finish it. She could start a sentence, he could finish it. I mean, they were just soulmates.
Yeah, I noticed that in one of their one conference. It seems like they would just almost became one unit. It's pretty wild. And what was this? So he just went out to USCLA and picked her out, or what? That was an interesting story. I mean, how they got together.
I shared it earlier.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, if you want to add to it.
Well, I'm the one who wants to know the why behind everybody. So I asked Durk how he found Sandy. And he said, I wanted somebody smart. I wanted somebody that was attractive. I wanted somebody that I could spend the rest of my life with. I mean, he had a whole list. So it was like a mathematical formulation. So he found Sandy at UCLA, and she was one of the female presidents at the time of one of the I don't remember what club she was.
Smart Women's Club.
I mean, and once they met, they hit it off. But it's even like when they moved to Tonopah, everything had like a mathematical equation or a protocol that would do things with. It was just fascinating how Durk's mind worked. And I loved watching them interact together because he was very, very kind and very protective of her.
And I don't even know if they ever got legally married or not, because she didn't take the name.
No, they did. They got legally married.
They got legally married.
I think it was in '68.
Yeah, that brings up another question. Durk's name is always first.
Yeah.
What is that? Because they decided to go alphabetically, or what?
No, it's just the way it was. And, I don't know, like you, Greg, and you, Michelle, do people, when they write you, they say, Dear Greg and Michelle, or do they say, Dear Michelle and Greg? It's just becomes a habit at a certain point. And it didn't matter, frankly, it didn't matter to Sandy. Sandy was not a feminist.
Durk and Sandy sounds more like a law firm than Sandy and Durk,
Yeah.
A law firm.
Well, a lot of times we just refer to him as DNS.
Yeah.
Or DP and SS. Yeah.
So I don't think it was a big deal. Sandy,
when I wrote a book about my baseball career, not promoting it, but it's just it's certainly nothing to compare with life extension. I sent Sandy. I wrote autographed a copy and sent it to Sandy, and Durk says, I love that title of your book. And I said, the day the Yankees made me shave, I said, "Why do you like my title?" He goes, "Because it'll inspire people to buy it to find out why they made you shave."
Yeah, Greg, you could have called them double play and shortstop.
Yeah.
DP and SS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what we need to do ongoing here, I think, is number one, Scott, Michelle and I will find out about the books.
Yeah.
And see what we can do about that. But I think that the legacy of
wait, what do you mean find out about what book?
His library, Durk's library is going to go somewhere.
Oh,
what's that?
Libraries, it's always tragic when somebody's library gets when there's somebody who has a really awesome library and that library just gets split up. It is such a tragedy. You can't imagine what's in there. There's got to be stuff in there that's out of print and stuff that you probably
it's going to go somewhere, and I can't say that we're going to have any influence on where it goes, but there's talk about having a place where his collections are going to be held. Now, Scott, we've mentioned your friends there in Washington, and
it's the organization that I'm president of, actually, and I would very much appreciate it if it could be part of the library there. It'd be great, actually, and it'd follow in the footsteps of Bill Sardi and others who who have bequeathed their books to that library. It'd make a great addition, and it'd be well taken care of and presented.
I thought the world of Bill Sardi. I think we met him at conventions in Vegas, that we have attended over the years. I think we met him, and he's very respected. But let us do some work on our side, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, Scott, with the possibility of what we can do.
Well, that's great. I remember when Bill Bradford died, that was the first thing I thought of. What is going to happen to Bill's library? It's just. Mm-hmm.
In fact, the people that are probably going to decide are probably listening to this call right now that we can have you get in touch with them.
Well, and I think everybody that had a heart for Durk and Sandy feels the importance of their legacy. And I do know from what I've heard that being very protective with the things and making sure that, things are staying intact so that they can make some good decisions with this.
Yes. I think the library is really important because they have not just books, but I mean,
you have a place to put Sandy's work too.
That too.
That's right.
Yeah. A person's library will tell you so much about that person too. It really is. I mean,
well, don't read the books behind us because you're not going to be too impressed. Okay.
No. I see the most important one right now is life extension. So
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that's good. Well, we're almost out of time, aren't we, Chris?
We'd set this for 2 hours. I'm open to staying longer, but Chris,
you want to book a call about baseball while we're talking right now?
I might do that sometimes, Greg. I'll email Greg. The main question is, was George Orta safe?
Oh, stop! You're a Blue Jays fan?
I was an 85. I've mostly been a Pirate fan, but you know what that's been like. Jeez.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah,
tough
I always had a lot of respect for Brett. He was just a great athlete. Maybe if he'd had some of these supplements, he could have gotten 400 that year.
True. That's true. Yeah.
He was a great athlete and just a classy player. And Pine Tar. Oh, jeez, who won't forget that?
Yeah, I played in the Pine Tar game, and I had locker next to George for 5 years, so I've got more baseball stories than I do anything else.
Yeah,
so whenever you're ready.
Yeah, George stories and just George and Rich Gossage.
Exactly. Now, where do you live, Chris?
I live in Austin right now, or the Austin area, Texas. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Okay.
Yes. So you got started with the Rangers, and actually it was interesting, Greg. You actually got drafted by the Senders when they were still the Senders. Yeah.
Washington Senators back in '71. I was, I like to say I was the last surviving Washington Senator, but Bill Madlock played longer than I did. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh, Mad Dog. Yeah, yeah. He was with the Pirates for a while. Yeah. Bill
I was in spring training with him in Plant City, Florida, when in '72, '73, before he got traded to the Pirates.
Madlock had 4 batting titles, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. I wonder how many guys who had that many batting titles
should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Madlock was a good. Yeah, Madlock was a tough.
Well, you are a baseball fan.
I was much more back then. You know, I don't pay attention to it I don't pay attention to sports like I used to. But you know,
I don't either.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go, everybody. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to have to go pretty soon as well. It's actually dinner time here in Europe. So
yeah, it's we're all gonna go. I think we'll probably sign off. I don't know if anybody any other comments. Well,
no, it's nice to meet 3 new friends, and Scott, we've talked before, and Scott, I've seen your picture in a lot of magazines, so you're pretty well known around the world, I think.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear, but it's all untrue what they say about me. I beat that rap.
And Mary, I hope to see you someday when your picture comes.
Here.
Yeah,
this was a big surprise. I did not expect.
The problem with Mary is she would have outshined us all. So it's they've been a blessing for us 3 men that we haven't been able to see her, because she's really
and thanks for all the listeners who might still be listening or who are listening on tape, because we're talking about some famous influential people that really did more than most to help humanity. And Durk and Sandy, we miss you.
By the way, somebody needs to update their Wikipedia pages. It's still no indication of their deaths on there.
It's true.
Where are you, Greg?
Overland Park, Kansas.
Okay, so you liked Kansas City so much you stuck around the area then? Yeah.
Well, you know, I get free parking and free tickets. You know, so it's hard to give it up.
Yeah, I suppose you probably still get people still occasionally bump into you and say, "Oh yeah, Greg Pryor, I remember you." You know, maybe it happens. You know.
No, it's so funny. I get people send me baseball cards and want me to sign them and send them back. About every week, I get cards in the mail. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you get that many cards, geez, how many does George Brett still get?
I don't know. It's I'm just glad I'm not a Hall of Famer, basically, because I can go out and eat and not be bothered.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, you probably occasionally get people who.
Yeah, I'm just glad I'm not Travis Kelce. I'm glad I'm not Kelce.
You know, I can imagine if you're somebody and maybe it happens, you know, once every 2 or 3 times a year and somebody recognizes you, it's probably kind of nice. But if it's 2 or 3 times a week, it probably gets to be a real pain in the ass.
Oh yeah, you got to buy every seat in the restaurant to go out and eat dinner here if you're Kelce or Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. And who knows? Maybe,
you guys come to Kansas City.
Dawson, you know,
we would love to have and show you around the town here. So hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Kansas is still one state I haven't. Kansas is one of 4 states I haven't been to, and I've not really been to the KC metro area. It seems like it's a pretty nice place to live, though.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It's been a tribute to Durk Pearson and Sandy Shaw. We love you guys, and I hope. Thank you for all you've done for us. So I'm shutting down the stream. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.